That jacket she added to her cart at 11 p.m. because an algorithm surfaced it 3 times in one day. That pair of trousers she bought because someone on Instagram made it look essential. And now, 3 months later, she has worn it once. All of it just hangs there. Costing space. Costing the 6 minutes she loses each morning deciding. Costing, slowly and quietly, the calm she was supposed to walk into the day with. Now picture a different morning. A woman in Kyoto. A much smaller closet. She opens it, reaches for exactly what she needs, and is dressed in 4 minutes. She is not a monk. She is not an ascetic. She is a regular person who buys clothes exactly once per season, 4 times a year, deliberately, and no more. And somehow, she feels more composed than the first woman has felt in months. While the rest of the world keeps buying, they quietly figured out that owning less is a form of knowing more. This is not a story about minimalism as a lifestyle brand. It is a story about what actually happens, specifically and measurably, when someone restructures how they consume clothing. 1 month in, 1 season in, 1 full year in. Stay with this until the end, and you will walk away with a completely different relationship to every piece of clothing you already own. Here is the broken equation that most of the modern world runs on without ever questioning it. More options equals more freedom. More freedom equals more happiness. It sounds reasonable. It is, in fact, measurably wrong. Barry Schwartz is a behavioral psychologist at Swarthmore College. In his 2004 research framework, The Paradox of Choice, he built the case that abundance of options doesn't liberate people. It paralyzes them. He used the example of buying a pair of jeans. When there was one style, people chose quickly. They left the store satisfied. When there were dozens of cuts, washes, and fits, people spent far longer deciding, felt less confident in what they chose, and experienced more regret after the purchase. Not less. He called the people who always seek the absolute best option maximizers. The people who chose something good enough and moved on, he called satisficers. And his data showed something uncomfortable. Maximizers consistently report lower life satisfaction than satisficers, even when they objectively end up with better outcomes. What the Japanese seasonal wardrobe does, instinctively, structurally, culturally, is convert a person from an involuntary maximizer into a deliberate satisficer. Not by limiting choice, but by deciding when and how choice enters the picture at all. The data doesn't just support this approach. It explains why it works so well. Month 1, she decides to try it. Not as an experiment, as a commitment. She will buy what she needs for this season, just this season, and then she will stop. The first thing that happens is not liberation. It is discomfort. She walks past a window display. She sees a sale notification on her phone. She feels the familiar pull, that low-grade urgency that modern retail is architected to create. And for the first time, she has a rule that interrupts it. Not this season. She already chose. What she doesn't expect is how the pieces she already owns begin to change. Not physically, but in how she sees them. There is a Japanese word, Mottainai, that has no clean English equivalent. It is approximately 800 years old. It emerges from Buddhist philosophy and carries the idea that every object has an inherent dignity, a proper state, a true essence. And to waste that object before it has lived its full life is not merely inefficient. It is a kind of erasure. The word itself comes from 2 root parts. The first, matai, refers to that inherent dignity, the essential nature of a thing. The second, nai, means there is none. Together, the feeling of the word is this: to waste something is to declare that its essential nature no longer matters. To throw away a garment with years of life still in it is not neutral. It is a statement about that object's worth. In month 1, she hasn't fully articulated any of this, but she begins to act as though she has. She notices that the 3 pieces she deliberately chose for this season get worn, and worn again, and worn differently. She pairs them in combinations she hadn't considered before. She finds that the constraints created by having fewer options doesn't make her feel limited. It makes her feel creative. This is the psychological mechanism underneath Mottainai. When people stop rotating through objects quickly, they begin to develop what researchers call the endowment effect, the documented cognitive tendency to assign greater value to things they already own and have chosen deliberately. The clothing is no longer inventory waiting to be replaced. It becomes, quietly, hers. 3 months pass. 1 full season. She has not bought anything new. This is unusual enough in her life to feel almost strange, that quiet where the arrival notifications used to be. What she notices instead is something harder to name. She knows her clothes now. Not in the abstract way, objects that cycle through your space. She knows the weight of her coat in November. She knows which combination of pieces makes a Tuesday feel composed. She knows the thread at the cuff of her favorite sweater, that it is beginning to thin, and she finds herself not annoyed by this, but tender toward it. There is a classical Japanese aesthetic concept called mono no aware. It was formalized in the 18th century by a cultural scholar named Motoori Norinaga in his literary analysis of a 1,000-year-old Japanese novel. The phrase points to a bittersweet sensitivity to the impermanence of all things, the gentle emotional weight that arises precisely because something beautiful will not last forever. The word itself builds from 3 pieces. Mono means things, objects, material things, the stuff of the world. No is a linking particle, meaning of, and aware, a Heian-era word, carries a feeling that sits between tenderness and sorrow. Something like the poignancy of things. The phrase describes a person who sees an object and understands, viscerally, that it is temporary, and loves it more for exactly that reason. Cherry blossoms are its most famous symbol in Japan. They are not celebrated despite the fact that they fall. They are celebrated because they fall. The impermanence is not the tragedy. The impermanence is the point. Applied to clothing, mono no aware produces an entirely different relationship with what you own. A garment bought seasonally, worn throughout that season, mended when it begins to wear, and eventually retired after years of use. That garment has an emotional arc. You were present for its whole life. You remember where you wore it and what you were doing. Its threads carry actual history. Fast fashion structurally prevents this. Something purchased on impulse, worn twice, and cycled out before the season ends never becomes a repository of experience. It is purchased to be replaced, and so it is. 3 months in, she catches herself mending a small seam on her coat. She doesn't think of this as unusual. She doesn't think of it as minimalist virtue signaling. She thinks of it as obvious. That's mono, no aware working. Not as philosophy. As a quiet shift in how things feel. 12 months. She is standing in front of her closet again. The same closet she started with, but entirely different in what it holds. She hasn't counted exactly, but her wardrobe is roughly a third of what it was a year ago. Not because she threw everything away in one dramatic gesture, because things retired naturally, and she did not replace them with something new simply to fill the space. And the space is still there. She looks at it. Not with the anxiety of scarcity, with something closer to clarity. There is a Japanese concept, among the most foundational in the entire aesthetic tradition, called ma. It is pronounced simply, ma. And it is the concept of meaningful emptiness, the idea that the space between things is not absence. It is an active force. It shapes what surrounds it. It gives the objects around it room to matter. The written character for ma is built from 2 images, a gate and a sun. The original image is of sunlight streaming through an open doorway. Not the gate, not the sun, but the light that only exists because of the space between them. Ma is that light. It is what the empty space makes possible. You find ma in traditional Japanese architecture, in rooms where nothing is placed without intention, where the bare floor is not waiting to be furnished, but is considered its own element. You find it in Japanese music. In the deliberate rests between notes, where a musician trained in this tradition understands that silence is not the absence of music. It is part of the composition. And you find it, neuroscientifically, in what happens to the human brain when a decision environment is simplified. When a closet contains fewer items, all of them chosen deliberately. The prefrontal cortex operates differently. There is less competition for attention among options. Less decision fatigue accumulating before the day has properly started. Barry Schwartz's research showed that this kind of cognitive friction compounds across thousands of small decisions over time. The reduction of that friction doesn't just improve the speed of choosing what to wear. It releases attentional capacity that migrates into every subsequent decision of the day. The Japanese seasonal wardrobe creates ma not because the empty space is beautiful in some abstract sense. It creates it because the empty space is functional. The closet with 8 pieces in it, all intentionally chosen, gives each piece room to be visible, considered, and used. The closet with 40 pieces pressed together collapses every item into background noise. And here is where this becomes something deeper than a wardrobe philosophy. What she notices at month 12 is a change in identity. Not the dramatic kind, not a person who announces their transformation online. Something quieter and harder to undo. She no longer identifies as a person who needs to keep acquiring. She identifies as a person who chooses well. This is what identity researchers call a stable self-concept. A durable sense of self that doesn't require constant external input to feel valid. The maximizer who needs a full closet is, in a sense, dependent on the act of acquiring to feel like she has enough. The person who has practiced who has learned to find sufficiency in the space, no longer needs the acquisition to feel whole. At month 12, she opens her closet and reaches for what she needs. She is dressed in 4 minutes. She doesn't feel deprived. She feels, for the first time in years, exactly like herself. What you carry from this video is not a minimalism manifesto. It's not a command to throw things away tonight. It is one question. This evening, not tomorrow, tonight. Open your closet and look at it the way you looked at someone else's closet at the beginning of this video. Count, roughly, how many pieces are in there. Then count, honestly, how many of them you reached for in the last 30 days. The gap between those two numbers is not a measurement of your wardrobe. It is a measurement of how much decision weight you are carrying every single morning without knowing it. The Japanese seasonal approach asks one thing, that you buy less, but choose better. That each piece entering your space was wanted before it arrived, not discovered and then abandoned. That you develop, over time, a closet with enough empty space that what remains has room to matter. The research shows that this kind of structured simplicity doesn't just change how you feel about getting dressed. It changes how much of yourself you bring to the rest of the day. And 30 years from now, when you look back at your life and the objects in it, the coat that stayed with you through a decade, the sweater that has a story attached to every thread, you will not remember how much you bought. You will remember what you kept and what it meant. If someone in your life is drowning quietly in a closet that doesn't know them anymore, send this to them. Not as advice, as a mirror. This video is for educational and informational purposes only. The perspectives shared here are drawn from behavioral research and cultural observation. They are not professional, financial,